Joining me now is the CEO of WPP, the world's biggest advertising company. Welcome, Sir Martin Sorrell.
Early morning. I don't know whether anybody else is awake this morning.
Yeah, here in Davos, they probably
Certainly
already are.
And
actually, I have to say, I love your array of hats every year. And this year, it's the Russian theme.
Yeah, I guess it's pretty appropriate. But,
very appropriate.
Although, obviously been ups and downs in Russia in the last few days.
We've heard
good
from
news and bad news.
The President Medvedev.
Yes.
Is this a support? Is this where you would like to be? Because actually, they are becoming much more open to investors. And certainly, it was very clear by yesterday's speech that he wants to mean business.
Right. Well, we had a private session with the president of the IBC and the International Business Council, with 110 CEOs from around the world. And it was a really good session. It was very open. It's Chatham House rules, but he was very open and very frank and I would say realistic, and attempting to be as open and truthful about the situation in Russia to encourage FDI, foreign direct investment, in Russia. Now, we see an eastward shift in Europe, just like we see an eastward shift elsewhere, or southwards or southeastward shift in the world as a whole. And Russia, combined with Poland and with Germany, Germany being one of the strongest economies in the world, export-driven, high-value-added manufacturing-driven. Poland was actually one of the economies that was not affected, in our experience, and I think most of our clients' experience, by the Lehman weekend and the Lehman crisis and the subprime insurance monoline crisis. And throughout 2009 and into 2010 was reasonably strong. So that axis of those three countries is extremely powerful, driven by Russian oil. At $100, the Russian economy works in spades. So at $60 to $70, it does well. So we expect Russia to be extremely powerful. Three things have happened in the last few weeks interesting. Firstly, winning the World Cup. We were on the receiving end of that in England. The Pepsi Wimbledon deal. And you have Indra Nooyi here in Davos. And last but not least, and probably most importantly, the Rosneft BP deal. Who would have thought the Rosneft would have ended up with 5% of BP, and with the option, of course, to go a little bit higher. But, Martin,
does it mean that actually you want to acquire something in Russia, or at least grow organically?
We're the largest group in Russia by some way. We have about $200 million of revenue. I think it's amounts to about a 20–25% market share in the market. We would like to, and we are actually in the process of talking to one or two companies in Russia, and I anticipate that we will be doing a little bit more. This morning we announced another deal in South Africa. So we're very focused on the new markets, which I would include Russia in, and Poland, and in Germany I would include the new markets because of this eastwards expansion on new media, on digital, just as it affects Bloomberg, and last but not least, consumer insight. And in Russia we have a very big consumer insight business, which we'll probably add to.
Overall, how concerned are you about the world economy? Because we've been speaking to CEOs who say, well, actually, they're not too sure about how much will actually grow.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think there's a restrained optimism here at Davos, which it's very dangerous to try and sum up the mood, but I think it's generally true. I mean, people like Nouriel Roubini, we had a session with him on TV yesterday. We had a further session with him later in the day. He's a little bit more optimistic than I've ever seen him. Dr. Doom or Dr. Death is slightly less gloomy. We had three economists again at the IBC, again, Chatham House rules, but generally, Larry Summers was there. We had one of the prominent Chinese economists, plus Martin Wolf. They were more optimistic, I thought, than most people in the room. I think the CEOs actually were more restrained. One of the things is there's a lot of fear in boardrooms. Non-execs don't want trouble. CEOs certainly don't want trouble. Bill Green of Accenture said, average life of a CEO is about 3.6 years. We're a very uncertain breed, so we tend to be a little bit less
more cautious,
less optimistic.
Because what, of austerity measures in Europe, for example?
Well, no. If you look at the world, it's moving at different speeds. The IMF
for sure
underline this as well. So you have BRICS in the next 11. You have digital in the functional side. The middle ranges of the USA and Germany, and the bottom division is Western Europe, the UK, maybe moving into Division 2 because they're doing something about the deficit. Newspapers and periodicals most challenged by what's going on in the media. So we tend to be very cautious. You look at multinational companies, there's about $2 trillion in cash on their balance sheets. They're relatively unleveraged. In this environment, in the West, you keep it tight, you don't invest in capacity. Maybe one of the reasons why we had such a strong year last year and accelerated into the fourth quarter was because you invest in brand, you invest in holding share rather than investing in capacity. And I think that's critically what happened last year.
So you're on the CEO side, you're more cautious?
Well, I'm naturally more cautious because I'm a member of the CEO's trade union, but I think it's the mood here in Davos amongst governments, actually, to some extent, most economists, is, I think, restrained optimism. Probably the world economy will grow at about the same rate as last year, 4 to 5%. We're going to see great variations in that growth in those divisions that I mentioned, maybe Japan being in the fourth division. But I would say CEOs in general are feeling much better than they did last year, and this year will be pretty much the same. Dangerous thing to say is 2010.
But less long faces at the bar this year.
Less long
Sir
faces,
Martin.
yeah. And this time last year there was a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. Sir Martin, thank you.
Thank you.
Well,